Okay, it's 9:30. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today, the week before Christmas. Today we've got a special guest speaker, Mr. Sean Benningfield, the senior auditor here at the diocese, and he's going to be talking to you all about handling cash from the moment that it's collected until the moment that it's deposited. This topic was actually suggested by someone who attended last month's webinar. So you see that we do welcome your suggestions, and that's why it's important to give us your feedback in our surveys, which I'll be sending out afterwards. Um, if you have any questions during the presentation, because we don't have a whole lot of time, you can just type your questions in the chat, and Sean will address them at the end. So we don't have a whole lot of time, and he's got quite a bit of material to cover. So I will now hand over the mic to Sean.
All right, thanks, John, and thanks for having me on the call. I'll go ahead and click the take control button, John, and grab the slides. All right. All right. So, John, can you see the slides okay still?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, everyone. Well, good morning again. And yeah, this is a topic that we initially rolled out for an in-person audience, but I jumped at the opportunity to join the call today and get to do this on a remote perspective also, so that we can, touch a little bit different audience, perhaps. Some of you may have attended our call, our training that we did down in Gainesville, and some of you may be intending on attending the training that's coming up next year in 2025. So without further ado, we'll start flipping slides here. Just a little agenda that we have put together here. We put in, a couple of quick slides just about the goals of the audit department. But as John said, this call is primarily geared towards cash controls, cash handling, banking, like John said, pretty much from start to finish. So we're going to talk about the bags that we should be using. There again, this is geared mainly towards a church audience that's dealing with offertory and how to handle that. But there are, I think, some good takeaways for if you're in a school. There's some good takeaways for that team as well. So we'll go down through money counting, and then of course, banking, counting up, logging all the money, using the forms that you need to use, and getting your money to the bank safely. So next slide. These are three things that we really talk a lot about. The goal, of course, is, to protect you and your church or school, and obviously make sure that there's no, cracks that we could have funds slip through, and those cracks could be caused by any of these three things, really. Improper training, false accusations more deals with if you are not following the processes that you really should be. I think everyone knows, that whole concept of dual control, right? So if you don't have dual control in place where there's two people with the money at all times, that's what opens you up to a potential situation where somebody can make accusations, which of course aren't true typically, right? But you don't want to put yourself out there, in any capacity, whether it be somebody in the office, a sacristan, an usher, somebody taking the money to the bank. So that's why it's just so important that there's strength in numbers, and that we always want to have people there together, anytime there's money out involved. And then, of course, the fraud triangle, dealt a lot with that in my old job. Fortunately, that is really not typically a concern. But every once in a while, you will see those stories online where when the controls aren't followed, a fraud or theft situation can arise. And there is such massive temptation, and that's kind of what this fraud triangle represents, is when people make bad decisions when they're pressured, when people make bad decisions because they start rationalizing that certain things are okay, and then of course the problem grows and gets bigger and bigger, and then opportunity is the third piece, and that's when we as managers, if we don't do a good job of controlling the situation and following the policies, then people have those opportunities, or maybe they think no one's looking or no one cares. So we talk, in the loss prevention world, in a former life, we talked a lot about the impression of control, right? So following your policies gives that impression of control, and of course, let's hope we have control. But more important, perhaps, is the impression to everybody else, no matter what, that we have control. So next slide here, we just talk a little bit about having good controls is good stewardship. So, everything that we do in the church really relies on having these controls in place and protecting our assets and protecting, especially churches with the offertory. It pays our salaries. It keeps the lights on, keeps the roof, keeps the roof over our heads, so that that we're dry inside, and that we could have mass and do all the things that we do within the church, and outside of the church too. All of the goodwill and things that we do out in the community, and many of the missions, and the clubs and organizations that we have, all run off of these gifts, right, that are a blessing to the church from our parishioners, and so we have to protect them. And we're going to talk some about how we protect the offertory and just money in general, like tamper-proof bags, master log, dual control, cash receipts, and having a safe to lock up our money in. And as John said, this is going to be kind of a quick overview of all that. Want to try to keep it to within a kind of a 30-minute time frame. So, if I gloss over something that you have a question about, as John said, throw a question in, and we'll take a look at those at the end. So, next slide. We kick off here with our discussion about the tamper-proof bags. A lot of entities will just order these tamper-proof bags online, like through Amazon, for instance. I've seen, you really are dealing with two separate sets of bags, right? There's the bags that the ushers use in the church once the offertory comes up to the altar and the money is collected. We put it in a bag, and then a lot of churches will use a separate set of bags to take their money to the bank, and they'll seal it up in one of those bags. So you could have up to two different sets, but at a minimum, they need to be pre-numbered so that we could track them. They need to be perforated. There's a little tab up at the top. I'm sure we all know about the little tear-off strip. That's really very important. Nobody's going to keep that big bag once you tear it open. I mean, well, you might, but don't really need to, because all of the information about what's contained in that bag should be on that little tear strip up at the very top there. And that's the piece that we want to keep. So, in keeping with that, we want to make sure that two people sign that as well. So I put down at the bottom, the top priority for ushers and any other volunteers assisting with the collection is to make sure to sign, initial, and date and seal the bag. Two initials are needed to ensure dual control. So like if Holly or myself come in, to do our review in your church or school, especially with the churches there again with these bags, the only way we could really tell that you're following the process is if we're able to see those little tear strips, right? So it's just super important that the ushers are filling those out. Some churches will have a log. I think I'm going to flip forward to the next slide now. There's an example of a bag master log. Okay, so some churches will have something set up where that log will be in the sacristy, and the ushers are filling that out. That's great. That provides a lot of information, and you could tell in the example there. This is just an example log, so you could see that there's what mass is this for, who issued it, what was the date. But ultimately, if you want a simpler system than that, the most important thing, this is the key takeaway to this whole log process, is that we're tracking the bag numbers. And if I flip back a slide, right, every bag up at the top, you're going to have that bag number, right? And that's what we're tracking, because if you send 10 bags over to the sacristy, you want to make sure that you get 10 bags back. And that's the most important thing, is that we're checking that all 10 of those come back. If the third bullet down there, if a bag is accidentally destroyed, it's kind of like a voided check, right? So you still want to keep track of that number. And it's okay if you just say, this is voided, we know what happened to this bag. But what we don't want is a bag that we don't know what happened to, or it never did come back to the office. That's an exposure. That's a concern. A loophole in the system where that bag could have $5 in it, or it could have $15,000 in it, and that's what we want to prevent. So, bottom line around bags, we want to make sure that we're tracking all the bag numbers that we're sending over to the sacristy, and that money is being put into. This is just another example here, of a filled out log. So this would be a scenario where you do have ushers or sacristans that are filling this out, putting their initials once the item's returned. And the key things that you got to have, of course, is the bag number. And we put on here, that who was it issued to, what was the date returned, who was it returned to. But really, I would go back to what I said before. The most important thing on this log is going to be the bag number. Key takeaway. Okay. And then, we did our in-person training and ask everybody, what are the things that you see wrong with this picture? And this is a very well filled out log, but if we don't know, when it was returned or who it was returned by, which are these blanks over here, that would be something, that would be a concern if we don't know if we ever got that bag back or not. Okay, so knowing that you got the bag back, very important. And then church collection. So when we go through our collection process, as I said, we want to make sure that we've got 2 unrelated ushers that are collecting those funds. There again, based on that whole principle of dual control, that the ushers, as of course, we have different systems. So you may have in some churches, a basket is passed around. In some churches, the usher holds, like a basket on a stick and extends that down the pews for the collection. Occasionally, I'll see a church that has a basket in the back of the church. That let's hope they are watching very carefully that basket, or there may be like a box that the money is inserted into a slot. But typically, I've been to a lot of these, and so is Holly. And what we typically see is a collection plate being passed around, and you just want to watch the plate for any type of unusual activity as it's being passed around. And then everything's collected either at the back or front of the church, and typically brought forward to the altar. So we need to get that money at the end of Mass into that tamper-proof bag and have the ushers sign it, as I said, and then got to lock them up. So typically, there again, I'm just kind of sharing what I see as the most common practice. Maybe not the same practice for all churches, but I would say more churches than not have a safe in their sacristy that is a drop safe, that the money is dropped into the top of the safe. And then someone from the office goes over. 2 people from the office will go over and dial the combo or key in the combo, open up the safe, and take the cash out of the bottom. There again, there's some churches have old safes that everyone, you have key people that know the combination to the safe and that they could open it. But more often than not, we'll see the drop safe. And if you don't have a drop safe, I would highly encourage that. It's a great system, and they're really not as expensive as one might think. And once again, when we're going through and collecting the non-offertory related, like pour box and candle box, that type of thing, you still want to have 2 people on that process as well. And if the money's not going to be counted immediately, it should be sealed in a bag. Okay, and then this is a topic around schools, and really this could apply to churches as well. But the sealed, secured bags are not as important in a school. But what is important is we want to make sure that all parents get a receipt for if a parent comes in and has money to turn into the office. This is typically not tuition money that we're talking about, but funds that are collected for incidentals. We want to give them a receipt for those funds. And we want to make sure that at a very minimum, before the money is sent to the bank, that it's counted by or verified by a second person. So this is just the receipt process here, where we make sure that everyone gets a receipt, especially when they're paying cash. Okay, and now we move into on this next slide. This is a ministry within our churches, and it's a very important ministry. Hopefully, everyone is rewarding or at least thanking this ministry for all their hard work and dedication. And it's proven that the system works better when you could build this ministry out and have more count teams so that you could rotate, right? So ideally, if you have 3 count teams and each team's only coming in on Monday morning, once every 3 weeks, or Sunday afternoon once every 3 weeks, it really is minimally a burden on them. What's tough is when you get down to one of those situations where no one's volunteering, no one's accepting it if the pastor taps them on the shoulder and asks them to join this ministry, and it's the same people working weekend after weekend or Monday after Monday. That's not ideal. And that's where we also get into a situation where you don't want to have husbands and wives or people living in the same household, two people that are related, both on the same money counting team. But sometimes, unfortunately, it tends to devolve into that if we're not really trying to pump up this ministry and get everyone, engaged. So, the pastor or administrator must vet and approve all of the money counters. Want to make sure we got the right people for the job. Related parties are not allowed to serve, as I said, on the same team. Could be on 2 different teams, no problem with that. Parish employees and finance council members are not allowed to be money counters. So, have I ever seen that? Yes, but that's a situation where we kind of devolved into, having that where there was no way out. There's no other situation, no other option for them. But we don't want that. Definitely against the rules, and it's called out in the parish office manual that you're not supposed to have employees working on the money counting teams. Teams must always adhere to dual control. Can't stress that enough. You'll see that a zillion times in here, but just can't stress enough how important it is, to have always have dual control of your funds for many reasons. And rotating teams, we talked about that. And be sure to thank and reward your money counting teams. I know lots of pastors out there that, if it's a really big holiday collection and they know that team is going to be working until, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they'll buy them, Chick-fil-A or pizza or something. Just, a lot of times just anything that to show them that we appreciate them and to give them that thank you. All right, and then preparing to count. So this purpose of this slide, is just saying you want to make sure that you do have your money counters in a secure, isolated area. Obviously, from a safety perspective, that's what these risk management calls are all about. So we want to make sure that nobody can just barge in and the money's all out on the table right there. And I really haven't seen issues with that. I think everyone overall does a great job of making sure that it is a secure and quiet location. Quiet is important because you could have errors that are made. Sometimes I'll be doing a visit on a Monday, And, if I come in when the money counters are there counting the money, I'll try to just take minimum amount of time, thank them for their service, let them kind of quickly walk me through their forms, but I try to get out of their hair as quick as I can because I certainly don't want to be the cause of an error that causes them additional work. Okay, and of course, we want to make sure we have all the forms and materials that we need. And I don't think any two parishes have exactly the same forms, but as long as we could walk through and see that there's a system that works and that there's no loopholes in that system. It's really up to you what type of form that you have. So no worries about that. All right, and then when we're preparing to count, as we alluded to before, you want to have members of the count team or office staff. Basically anyone could be, as long as it's two people, can be retrieving the funds from the safe. That a lot of times that'll involve a walk by two people over to the sacristy, and there's a picture, of kind of show and tell here, right? So there's that drop safe that I was referring to. It's hard to get a perspective of the size of that, but it's only maybe about 3 feet tall, maybe less, 2.5 feet tall. So it's not a really huge thing, but it is big and heavy enough where you couldn't just bear hug it and run out of the room. Some churches actually go to the additional step of bolting that into the floor, just to make sure that, you don't have multiple people trying to pick it up. And we certainly don't want that. But what's going in there is what you see in that middle picture is those bags, signed, sealed, and delivered. And then we bring those back on Monday, typically Monday morning. They're torn open, and the money counters go to town on them and start counting them up. And then counting. Typically, this training doesn't really go a lot into, specific details of how you should count your money, or I'm going to move this pile to the left and this pile to the right. This person's going to count the checks. This person's going to run a tape, because there again, everybody has a little bit different system. And a lot of that is based on how big your church is, how many money counters you have, how much do you want to distribute the labor amongst your team. So that kind of varies, right? But all in all, we just want to make sure that, there's a count sheet and in the end, a deposit summary form. And of course, that's one thing that Holly and I look at, when we come in for our visits. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here in the next couple of slides is the three-way match, right? So we want to make sure that the amount that the bank gives us credit for matches what we came up with on that count sheet, that master sheet. And if it doesn't, then of course additional research is involved. So I get a lot of questions about this. We do want to make sure that we photocopy all the loose checks. Now, if your church is using one of the check scanner forms, some banks have where you could basically get a soft copy of all the checks that you scanned in. So you wouldn't necessarily need it. I mean, I'm all for saving paper if we can, but we still have to have, if we don't have paper copies, we got to have digital copies of the information so that we could go back if anyone has a question about their check, and we could pull those checks up and look at them. So we want to make sure that we make those photocopies of the loose checks, not as critical, with your envelope checks. And jam them all on one sheet of paper. If you could reduce the size and you could get 8 checks on one piece of paper, as long as it's legible, you're okay. And then removing the cash and checks from the envelopes. We just want to make sure, of course, I think everyone that's dealt with this process knows this, but you want to make sure that, what's written on the check matches what they wrote on the envelope. And sometimes they may miss a zero or add a zero to their amount and cause some issues there. And then, of course, we have to reach out and contact them if that happens. But we want to make sure that the amounts match. Attaching, rubber band in those envelopes You only need to keep your envelopes for, I believe it's 90 days. And some churches, a lot of churches keep them longer. That's fine. If you want to keep those envelopes longer, that's no problem. I think, the philosophy is that if the parishioner has a concern about, their offertory amount, that they're going to contact you within 90 days. And so it really doesn't necessitate keeping the envelope much past that time frame. And we all know that those take up a lot of room. So, use your best judgment on that. But typically, after 90 days, we could dispose of the envelopes that were used. And then we want to run two tapes. That's in the instructions online as far as all checks goes. So we would just want to make sure that when we add up all the checks, that those amounts match. And I believe the instructions in the parish office manual do call for you to send over a copy of that strip as well when you send the money to the bank. And then the forms. So here's just a typical example of what the forms look like. And there again, we won't spend a lot of time, diving into the nuts and bolts of this because everybody's form is going to look a little bit different. But the things I would call out, is that you want to make sure that this bag number that you see on this form, that's the bag number that you would be sending to the bank. Okay, so not your usher bags, because you may have 6 or 8 usher bags from the collection, but so you're not going to write all those on here. This is where you would write, if you're using this secure bags, tamper evident bags, to send the money to the bank, you would write that number there. And of course, you want to have a breakout on your count sheet for your currency, your coins, and your checks, and then who counted that money. And then perhaps over here is the most important form, your deposit summary form. And there's really a double verification, two-way check on here to make sure that, both amounts add up properly. But once you get everything added up, we got to make sure that we've got our signatures. So this section here is going to be the signatures of those who counted the money. And we also need to make sure we get signatures of those who delivered the money to the bank or made the deposit. And there again, that bag number in the blue arrow here is the bag that they're taking the money over to the bank in. Okay, but I do see sometimes where we'll get signatures and we don't know who took the money to the bank because it could be any 2 out of these 4 people. Of course, I think everyone knows we want to have 2 people take the money to the bank, but we want to make sure we know who those 2 people are. A key thing here, if we do see a count error, we need to make sure that we cross through it with a single line, put 2 sets of initials showing that 2 people agree that there was an error and that it's been corrected. We don't want to use whiteout. We don't want to cover up anything because that leaves questions. What was the mistake that we corrected, and was that mistake confirmed by 2 individuals, right? So there again, dual control of everything. So you would just write the corrected amount in, and there again, that's a dual control policy. Building your packet, these will look a little different, but the best way that I see there, again, this is a typical process that I see is everything is built up into a packet, so the count sheet, count summary form, all of the little strips from the usher bags are attached here. That's one of the things that we look for. And we need these strips because there again, we have to look to confirm that there's 2 initials on there from 2 people to indicate that we had dual control. But just put everything together, and that includes the bank teller deposit confirmation slip. Once the money counters bring that slip back after they've been to the bank, carbon copy of the church's deposit slip, so usually what I'm looking at is the yellow copy because the white copy you're taking to the bank, collection count sheets, deposit summary forms, copies of all the paper checks, carbon copies of receipts for any uncounted offerings. So that would be, if we have front office, money that comes in the front office, pour box, candles, etc. And then, there again, those perforated strips. So you could have two sets of those strips. You could have the ones where the money was taken to the bank, but definitely the most important one is the usher strips with the two signatures on them. Okay, and then Holly, called out, this is more of a security factor on this, and I know it says so even in the parish office manual, but do you know what happens every Monday around 10 a.m.? Someone's taking, a large amount from the church to the bank. So that's why it's important, you want to have two people. The recommendation is two separate vehicles so that if there is an incident with the first vehicle, there's a trail vehicle that can report everything in, right? So that's the ultimate security. I know, sometimes it's difficult getting those two people together, but if you look at a good, better, best scenario, this is your best scenario to have two people take that money and bring it into the bank, whether it be, a night deposit or you're taking it inside to the counter or what have you, having that second that second person, and also vary the route. Whoever's taking the money to the bank suggests that they vary their route from time to time. I know everybody wants to get out of there on Monday after they do the count and get on with their day, but mixing up varying that time a little bit, even if it's just by a few minutes, that could be important as well. So, of course, we want to make sure that we give the money. I mean, if there were to be a scenario, a robbery situation, it's certainly not worth anyone getting injured, right? So we would, turn over the money at that point, call 911, and certainly we hope that never happens. And then at the bank, typically we want to make sure that the money gets deposited at the bank within 1 day of when it's counted. These are our different options: inside the bank, drive-through, night depository, no problem, regardless of how we want to do that. If we're using the night depository, we do need to get a deposit slip from the bank somehow. So some churches will send somebody back to pick that up the next day. Some churches will be able to print it off online, and get it that way. Same thing with schools. You have those two options. And then, of course, check deposits. We do have the remote check scanners. So it just makes your deposit a little bit lighter if you're able to scan all your checks. A lot of banks, of course, they like you using the check scanner because it makes it easier on their tellers. And you're pretty much handling everything from the comfort of your desk versus having to take all the checks to the bank. So that is certainly a great option if you could do it, but it does cost money, and the scanner costs money. So that is up to you whether you decide that you want to do that. And then signature of the two depositors, we talked about that already, but we just want to make sure we know who is taking the money to the bank. And of course, always stay vigilant and stay safe throughout this process. There are certainly controls that we could put in place, that will make this a safe and accurate process for everyone. And I think, John, that was our last slide there. So I think we're going to take questions now.
Yeah.
John, are you there? There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I had my mic off. I was talking for about 5 seconds here.
No worries.
Yeah, I saw one question but from in the chat from Kim. It looks like that he may have answered it though, in regards to who can and can't be money counters. I believe he covered that on slide 10. But Kim, if you're
Yes.
still on, if you want to, is there anything else that you were looking for, or did he answer your question? Yep. Okay, so are there any other questions? I know he went over a lot of information, a lot of great information. Um, and I'm nominating Sean to do all of my presentations because he did a fantastic job. So Sean, if you can keep your third Tuesdays at 9:30 open for me, please.
Well, I would be
Um,
happy to come back again sometime, and
yeah,
we
yeah,
could pick a different topic. So,
yeah, but yeah, no, I think you covered a whole lot. And to me, I'm not involved with that process, but it sounds like a stressful job. But hopefully Sean's presentation helps make things a little bit easier for you all. Um, thank you, Kim. Kim says it's very helpful.
well,
Um, any other questions before I close this up, close this out? Because I know I went a little bit over the time, but given the topic and the importance of it, I wanted to make sure you guys had this information. St. John Paul II is typing. They're typing a lot, so get ready, Sean. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Very helpful and informative. We appreciate that. Okay, so I'll be sending out a link to the playback so you can share it to anyone else who needs this training and review it at your own convenience. So look out for that. I'll probably within the next hour I'll be sending that survey out. Um, and I'll include well, I'll send separate emails, one for the playback link and then one for the survey. Next month, we're going to be going back to our maintenance and workplace safety related topics. You guys are, that's mainly for maintenance people, but lots of times that stuff can apply to you all as well. So I'll be sending out a tentative schedule for 2025 in the pastoral briefings, so you guys can plan for those ahead of time. Looks like there's no other questions, so that's all we have for today. I hope you all have a safe and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you all.
all right. Thanks for having me, John. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.